Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayanas. As a part of daily news analysis, we have selected certain articles from the Hindu as well as Indian Express. The topics of discussion that we are going to undertake today are as follows. First article is about the urban India as well as tiding over. Both these deal with the pollution that we are recently witnessing in the Delhi and also try to explain the pollution levels and the reasons behind it and how to solve it in other cities as well. It is from the Hindu and page number 8. The next article is on India-Qatar relations with regards to the recent. It is with respect to India-Qatar relationships where a court in Qatar has imposed death penalty upon 8 Indian Navy veterans who are working in a Qatar-based defense company. It is from the Hindu page number 8. The next is on hindsight bias and the equity markets. It tries to explain how the present economic circumstances at the global level is impacting India, as well as the reasons why Indian market is actually slowing down. It is from the Hindu page number 16. Next, app for mother and child welfare, which tries to track the nutrition levels of mother as well as children. It is a part of Poshan Abhiyan 2, and it is from the Indian Express page number 6. Next is the Wolbachia, an unlikely hero, where this method is a biological strategy to actually curb the mosquito-borne disease spread. It is from the Hindu Science 2. Now, let us see the first article. Coming to the next article, it is on increasing air pollution that we are witnessing in Delhi. Schools have actually declared holidays on account of the increased pollution in Delhi, especially the particulate matter pollution. We need to know the reasons behind the increased air pollution and why we are witnessing the increased air pollution from many years. This article tries to explain us. We have combined two articles from the Hindu. The titles of the articles are Tiding Over and Giving the Urban India a Better Life. So we also try to present you a model to explain how the urban life should be shaped, how sustainable urbanization is possible, how to learn from the nature and incorporate their best practices to make the urban life a sustainable habitat, rather than it being a gas chamber filled with pollution. The relevance of the topic. See, certain topics have been given in the news. We'll try to give them as well as in detail so that you could also answer preliminary examination related question. Commission for Air Quality Management. Next, from GS paper 1, the topic could be related to urbanization, and GS paper 3, environmental pollution and degradation. Many times questions are asked in examination in UPSC Mains. For example, in 2015, Mumbai, Delhi and Kolkata, the 3 mega cities, and the air pollution in the cities. Similarly, we have in this article dealt in detail about the pollution in Delhi. Now let us look at the context. The context is increasing air pollution, especially in the month of November that we are witnessing every year. We are going to see the factors behind it. Next is the reports which actually show many of the Indian societies are polluted to such an extent that they are situated in the top 50 among the world population in terms of pollution. The Energy Policy Institute at Chicago has shown that out of the 50 most polluted cities in India, the representation is 39 among the 50. This in itself shows how polluted our urbanization or urban life is. Next, the impact of pollution on the health of the individuals. The extent of life years that the pollution is decreasing is significant to actually it being a concern, to actually see it as a big problem. 5.3 years on an average at the India level and 11.9 years in Delhi. So this in itself shows the kind of problem it is. Okay. So the factors behind Delhi air pollution, natural and anthropogenic factors, weather related issues. In the month of November, we see the complete recession of monsoon winds. Monsoon winds distribute the air. This provides a movement to the air. And this movement of the air actually helps us to clean the air as well. And when monsoon recedes, the air is generally still. And in the month of November, because in Delhi the air is still, due to the absence of monsoonal winds, ultimately leads to the continuation of pollution that actually is created in Delhi itself. or else we could have seen the movement of winds carrying the air pollution. Okay, so monsoon that is present in the month of November is one of the important factors behind the increasing air pollution observed in Delhi. Next is the population increase. So if the population increases, the consumption increases, the pollution obviously increases. Because pollution itself is on account of the consumption practices that we are practicing in our life. In urban areas, it is further higher because of the transportation as well as the increased per capita income of the population. If you look at the Delhi, the census data has shown it has been increased. If you look at Delhi, if you look at the census data, it has increased by 45% from the year 2001 to 2011. Next up is the stubble burning practices that we are witnessing in the areas which are surrounding Delhi. It might be Punjab, Haryana, etc. Stubble burning is nothing but the stubble that is left out once the cultivation of paddy is completed. At the end of the cycle, the stubble that is left out is simply burnt by the farmers. So burning of this stubble is ultimately leading to the generation of pollution, and it is said that the pollution is mostly concentrated in the Delhi region. Especially in the month of November, the burning of the stubble is high, thus leading to increased pollution in the Delhi. Next is vehicular pollution. Vehicular pollution is one of the important factors behind the rise in air pollution. And the vehicle concentration is also increasing. It is said to have increased by 250% from the year 1990 to 2011. Next is the legislative factors. You might consider how legislative factors as a reason, but here is how. In Punjab, a special legislation has passed, the Punjab Preservation of Subsoil Water Act 2019. And this act was passed for a noble cause. Why? Because during the month of May, transpiration is high among the plants. Okay, why? Because it is summer season. Due to increasing intensity, obviously the transpiration is high. Thus, water will be wasted, right? If transpiration is high, nothing but the water that the plants take up is wasted, and this wasted water should be reduced, right? Especially given the lower ground level water that we are witnessing in the India. Due to lower water level that we are witnessing in groundwater in India, and thus we need to reduce the transpiration as slow as possible. So for that, Punjab has passed the legislation, Punjab Preservation of Subsoil Water Act 2009. This has pushed the cultivation of paddy to June, thus ultimately postponing the burning of stubble as well. Postponing stubble burning is now shifted to November. Okay, this is said to be one of the important reasons for the rising air pollution in the Delhi. Next, limited powers to Central Air Quality Management. Though it has been given powers, it is not stringent enough to actually curb the pollution levels in the Delhi. We need to give more power to the bureaucratic body to take stringent action. And this should be independent of the executive and legislature as well. Then only it has the possibility to take effective measures to stop the acts like stubble burning or increasing pollution in the Delhi, or the construction dust that is released in Delhi, the road dust in Delhi, etc., etc. So we need to empower Central Air Quality Management as well to actually reduce the pollution in Delhi. But that is not the case as of now. Next, the measures that we could actually take to reduce the pollution at the same time to see that our urbanization is sustainable. The coordination between agencies, okay? It might be pollution related, it might be transportation related, etc., etc. For example, if you are controlling transportation related pollution by promoting public transport, or you might promote electronic vehicles to ply on the road, etc., etc. For this, we require wide-range coordination among the agencies. Especially, coordination is required for enforcement of environmental standards. This enforcement should be stringent. Then only we could take measures to reduce pollution. Next is sustainable and ecological urbanization. We are going for rampant urbanization, and it is inevitable in India, and urbanization will increase as we go along. But this urbanization should be sustainable, and ecologically best practices should also be incorporated into this urbanization practice. One such way to pursue urbanization is given by Ian McHarg's 1960s book, Designing with Nature. He brings out the way in which ecologically best practices could be incorporated. Next, we have to focus on public transportation because private transportation is pollution intensive. And how? Firstly, we could resort to usage of the scheme called Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, JNNURM. Next up is the congestion tax to see that the congestion in the road could be reduced. We have to tax more upon the private vehicles, especially the bigger ones, two-wheelers, four-wheelers, etc., graded such that the bigger vehicles should be taxed more. And certain innovative practices like Jakarta and Tehran, which has an innovative practice, weekly car-free days. So these would definitely reduce the pollution levels. Next is we have to strengthen governance. As we already seen that environmental standard should not only be on papers but should also be in such a manner that it has the ability to show change on the grounds. For that, stringent enforcement is necessary, reducing the level of corruption, and we have to try to balance the economical and ecological growth. Next is the finances. We have to see that the mobilization of finances and the use of finances should be in such a manner to reduce the air pollution levels. Next, let us look into central air quality management. See, it is a body which has been created after the creation of Supreme Court appointed Environmental Pollution Prevention and Control Authority. Supreme Court has created this body to see that the air pollution in the city could be controlled. Later on, after this body was created, another body was created which is Commission for Air Quality Management in 2020. Okay, and this replaced the EPCA. Okay, this replaced it, and it has been given powers to actually give directives and also supersede the decisions that were taken by other bodies. For example, CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, or SPCB, State Pollution Control Board, okay, which could be seen here. It has the power to supersede. And it is a statutory body. Why? Because Delhi Assembly has created this body by enactment of Act. If a state passes legislation that ultimately leads to creation of a body, it has a statutory status. Next, let us look into the conclusion. The conclusion part is pollution especially affects the marginalized communities. That is, the vulnerable section is what bear the brunt of pollution the most. And if you look at the mechanics of life, it is the vulnerable sections who contribute the least. With regards to pollution, the vulnerable section contribution is the least, but yet they are bearing the brunt. So we have to take measures, especially to see that the vulnerable sections are not facing the brunt of the pollution. Now, let us see the next article. The ongoing diplomatic tussle between India and Qatar makes it important for us to understand the issue in detail and see how it impacts the relationship between India and Qatar. Okay? Recently, 8 Indian Navy veterans were handed down death penalty by Qatari court on the grounds that they were indulging in espionage activities, that is spying in the country of Qatar. Thus, they were given death penalty by the court. The title of the article is Much to Lose if the Indians in Qatar Case Festers. It is with regards to how the relationship between India and Qatar is going to be impacted due to this diplomatic tussle. Now let us see the relevance of this topic. India's diplomatic strength, power, bilateral relations with Qatar. Okay, you could expect a question on the bilateral relationship between both the countries. Prelims, current events of international importance, because it is an important event impacting India and Qatari relations. Mains, GS2 international relations. How could we expect a question on it? For example, there is a question in the year 2022. How will I2U2 grouping transform India's position in the global politics? Especially why this topic is important, because both Qatar and India are important countries of the global south. So again and again, we are emphasizing upon the South-South cooperation. The countries which are placed in the south side when compared to the northern side where the United States, Western countries, etc. dominate globally. We want the southern countries which are still trying to develop and prosper, cooperate with one another. Instead of this diplomatic tussle, there is a possibility of impact on the Global South cooperation. So Global South cooperation, for that perspective, at the international level as well as the certain developing countries, this topic is important. Let us see the context. The context is Indian nationals were handed down death penalty, as we have already seen. The grounds for arrest has been espionage and breach of sensitive secrets. These sensitive secrets pertain to the high-tech Italian origin submarines. Okay, so they were working in Qatar-based high-tech Italian origin submarines related company. So they have been accused of stealing the intelligence. So that is what we are looking into. The problems involved are, see, many consider this case as fabricated. The charge, the trials, etc., are not openly spelt out or openly disclosed so as to understand the nuances of the case, the details of the case, whether these veterans really indulged in the spying or whether case was conducted in a fair manner is the issue. See, the problems involved are details about the reasons for arrest and sentence, evidence, etc., which are involved in the proceedings, trials. These were not made clear. We do not know how to appeal. We do not know how to actually consider the gravity of the situation, the gravity of the issue. Thus, it becomes difficult for us to relieve the 8 Indian Navy veterans who are presently facing death charges so that we could acquit them from the courts. Added to it, limited consular access. So, the consul of India, which is situated in Qatar, the consular access to be provided to the citizens who are living abroad is important. Why? Because they go to the consul, Indian consul, and try to get legal assistance, especially given the might of government of India and its imprint abroad. It gives them an edge so that they could fight their case. But the consular access was not as open as was expected at the international level. Okay, it should be more open, but it wasn't the case. So this leads to suspicion. Why is there a sudden urge to conduct trials so quickly and impose death penalty upon Indians? Next is lack of transparency in the trial process, as we already discussed. The trial process was done as quickly as possible and thus impacted the outcome of the case. So we need to know the issue surrounding this issue. Next is point of consideration in saving the lives. How to see that we could save the lives of these 8 Indian Navy veterans is the issue that we are raising. How? Firstly, the options for India, the legal resolutions, right? That is the legal mechanism that work between India and Qatar, as well as the Qatari legislations, how the criminal justice system of the Qatar works. By pursuing legal appeals, obviously in Qatar, still we could appeal this sentence and see that we could somehow try to dispose of the case such that the Indians are able to free themselves from this sentence. And then is diplomatically, that is the international level diplomatic relationship between India and Qatar. So using these back channel talks or direct talks between Indian Prime Minister and the head of Qatari state, etc. So these all could be pursued. Let us see the kind of instruments that are at our disposal to be used to solve this case. Invoking diplomatic protests and negotiations. Like, for example, the diplomatic officials who head Indian embassies abroad could actually channel the communication of Indian government as well as Indians that they are not okay with the present circumstances that exist or present situation that exists between both the countries. So they could raise the issue with the diplomatic officials of the Qatar. Okay, this is important for influencing decisions. So this happens quite often so as to impact the flow of relationship between the countries. There is bilateral agreement to expatriate convicted citizens. Okay, we could actually expatriate convicted citizens. For example, if an Indian who is residing in Qatar, if he is convicted, then we could repatriate him. That is, bring back to India. There is a legal mechanism as well as the bureaucratic mechanism that exists through which we could bring the veterans. But the problem here is we do not have this facility in the case of death penalty. We are presently witnessing the death penalty imposed upon the veterans. So this channel doesn't work. Next is political intervention, as I already explained to you, the Prime Minister's appeal. That will have more impact upon the Qatar. Why? Because Qatar's Emir could actually use his pardoning power, and thus that power could be utilized to actually free the veterans. And it has been said that it was done in the past quite often. Next is international campaign. We have to build a campaign at the international level so as to free these veterans. Because prima facie, these charges which have been imposed upon the veterans doesn't seem to suggest that there is possibility of spying. They were simply doing the work as an employee in that organization. And there is no clear-cut evidence to actually suggest that they indulged in the spying operation. We have already seen certain high-ranking officials who are retired and have went abroad in search of employment, and they are doing wonderful job. For example, in the Singapore. So similarly, they could have actually given a lot of value addition to the Qatar, but somehow these charges got imposed upon them by fabrication or the indiscretion. That is what the authors or writers suggest. Next is, we have to raise an international awareness. At the same time, we could utilize the support of international human rights organization, because imposing death penalty is not a small issue. We are again and again witnessing all over the world to revoke imposition of death penalties as well as remove death penalty as a punitive measure in the criminal justice system. So we could take the assistance of NGOs, relevant international bodies, etc., etc. And then we could also resort to International Court of Justice as a final measure when all the things seem to fail. Okay, that is a final resort where even the Emir of the Qatar was not willing to release, then we could use this instrument. Next up is point of consideration. How this could impact the normalization of ties and why normalization of the ties is important, and thus resolution of this issue should be at the topmost priority between India and Qatar. Firstly, the smooth relationship between these countries is very much important. Why? Because welfare of 7 lakh Indian diaspora. Our diaspora is contributing immensely to the Qatar. So it is in our interest as well as the interest of the Qatar, which is dependent upon these Indian diaspora, for the development of the economy. Okay, the social security, the employment opportunity, the earnings from the employment. So it is significant for India as well as for building of the Qatari economy. Next, strategic goods. We indulge in transactions, the exports and imports with the Qatar. Certain important goods, like for example, we are dependent upon Qatar for the supply of LNG, liquefied natural gas. 48% of India's imports are from Qatar itself. So strategically, it is of quite a significance. Given our push to move away or to transition from the petrol diesel run economy to gas-based economy, so that environmentally too it is beneficial for the country, we are trying to import more and more gas so that gas could be used as an alternative to these fuels which are highly polluting in nature. At the same time, our dependence upon the Western Asian countries as well as the rest of the world with regards to the import of this fuel is higher. Thus, if the Qatar relationship goes to sidetrack or doesn't work well, then obviously it will impact our ability to diversify the imports from other countries for meeting our fuel requirements. So this is quite important to our economy as well. If the prices of the fuel go up, that ultimately impacts our economy as a whole due to concomitant impacts like inflation. So India also imports ethylene, propylene, ammonia, urea and polyethylene as well. So that is why the economically as well, this relationship is important. Next is to sustain the defense cooperation. The India is cooperating at the defense level, at higher level with the Arabic countries, never seen before. So we have to move in this direction with more intensity, and thus we could actually witness the benefits on account of it. For example, we are training Qatari military personnel. We are also participating in biennial Doha International Maritime Defense Exhibition and Conference, etc. At the same time, in furthering the defense cooperation agreement of 2008 that we have entered into with the Qatar. And the problem is this was not renewed since 2018. We need to also pursue this. More and more close cooperation in these countries are important, especially to reduce the impact of the terrorism that we are witnessing rest of the world. At the same time, Qatar is one of the important global players. What we need to also look into is how the present geopolitical issues are impacting the relationship between Qatar and India as well. Given the Israel-Palestine issue, the way India is treading in these waters with regards to supporting Israel as well as Palestine. We are on the one hand trying to sympathize with the Israel's issue of the Hamas attack. At the same time, we are also witnessing deadly attacks of the Israel on the Palestine state. One of it is the Gaza Strip. So we are also supporting the plight of the people who are witnessing tremendous amount of violence on account of the Israelis attack. So, as you already know, Qatar completely supports Palestine. We don't know how the relationship of all this could impact the outcome of India-Qatar present diplomatic tussle. Overcoming these issues are very important. Now let us move on to the next article. Coming to the next article, it is on economy, the inflation, the bond yields, the international economic scenario, and why Indian markets are faltering. That is what we are going to learn in this article. So, the topic of the article is the hindsight bias and the equity markets. Hindsight bias means the present opinion on the global economic situation is biased. Why it is biased, that we are going to learn. At the same time, the equity markets link to the present economic scenario. The relevance of the topic: bond yield, inflation, currency, depreciation, and devaluation. So all these topics are interrelated, and these topics are generally asked more in the preliminary examination. So we are going to learn about them in depth and how we could relate this topic to the present economic scenario. The UPSC syllabus, GS3, Indian economy. So firstly, let us see the previous year question to actually show the importance of this topic. There was a question about the Indian government bond yields. How the Indian government bond yields are impacted by various factors. As you know, in economy, it is generally logical. Something happens which ultimately leads to certain consequences. So the reasons behind the consequences is what we are all about, what we need to know. So it is regarding the United States Federal Reserves, Reserve Bank of India, inflation and short-term interest rates. So you could see the multiple topics that have been brought to establish a link between these concepts and the Indian government bond yields. So it is important for us to learn what is happening in the global level to crack even the preliminary examination as well. Now let us see the context. The context is Indian stock market's dip of less than 10%. See, many argue that the dip that we are seeing in the Indian stock market is less when compared to the global scenario. Yet this is significant enough. And many argue that this dip of 10% might actually cross. Why? Because now we are not living in an isolated environment. We are living in a globalized environment where Indian market is linked with the rest of the world. Thus, whatever happens in the rest of the world could influence India, and that is highly likely. For example, United States Federal Bank, which is the central bank of India, the decisions taken by the federal bank could actually influence Indian market as well. Okay. Next up is the surging bond yields. The bond yields are actually rising. This is a concern. Yields are nothing but the earnings that we make upon the investment that we do on the bonds. For example, if you buy a bond for 90 rupees and you are going to earn at the end of the maturity period, if you are earning 100, then the yield here is 10 rupees. Okay. The problem is the yields are increasing. The increase in yields is an indication that people are more interested in investments in the bonds rather than in stocks of the companies. If you invest in the stocks of companies, companies will have the capital, okay? The company bonds or company stocks, they will have the money that they could use in expanding their enterprise. But that is not what we are witnessing now. We are more into bonds. Bonds are like giving loans to a particular entity which is trying to mobilize finance from the market through the instrument of bonds. For example, if government is issuing bonds, generally in India, Reserve Bank of India issues bonds on behalf of the government of India. This is nothing but government is raising debt from the market. We are investing in the debt rather than pursuing investments in the stock market, which could actually lead to growth rates in the economy. So that is impacting the global economic growth as well. Okay. So the interest that the people are showing in the bonds is due to the global economic scenario. One of the important reasons is United States Federal Reserve's tightening step. Okay, that is Central Bank of United States is actually increasing. That is, United States is increasing the interest rates at the retail level. The interest rates of the entire economy of the United States is decided on the basis of the interest rates set by the United States Federal Reserves. Like the way Indian Central Bank, that is RBI, decides, the Federal Bank of United States also decides the interest rates of the economy of the United States. That ultimately impacts the entire world because of the way the citizenry of United States invests in the rest of the world. Okay? What happens if the interest rates increase is the bond yields are going to rise. That is, more and more people will come to invest in the bond market rather than investing in the stock market that we have already seen. Next, the concept that we are going to see to understand the scenario. Okay. First up is bond yield. That is the returns that you are going to get on the investment that you make on the bonds. Next is depreciation, means the value of the currency at the international market goes down. That is depreciation. The value of the currency falls in the international scenario. The exchange rate, how we use our currency to buy other currencies. The international transactions, how they are carried out. Okay. If that value goes down, then we call it as depreciation. And if it is carried out by the market forces, then only we use the term depreciation. We could actually reduce the value of the currency by intervention as well. RBI could intervene and reduce the value of the currency. That we call it as devaluation. Okay. Deliberate decrease in the price or value of the currency. Next is overvaluation, means we are overvaluing certain aspect. For example, here the currency. The value of the currency ultimately depends upon how it is in demand in the international scenario. Certain times, despite not having enough demand, we create it artificially. And this artificial creation leads to overvaluation. That is, the value of the currency is more than when compared to how it could have actually been, how the markets decide. But we are actually intervening and raising the value of the currency. For example, rupee value. The value of the rupee is considered to be overvalued than what it should have been. Next is K-shaped recovery. K-shaped recovery means the recovery of the economy is not uniform or not in one particular direction. There are various entities, various sectors within the economy, and they're not in one direction. That is, all are not growing. Certain aspects of the economy are growing, certain aspects are not growing. Actually, they are declining. That is what we call it as K-shaped recovery. Okay. So, these are the concepts that you should keep in mind to understand the present article. Why are Indian markets faltering? See, we have earlier explained that the present global scenario is mostly attributed to the increase in yields. But in reality, the situation is far more complex. We have to understand the nuances, then only we will be clearly understanding why the present economic scenario is not as per the way they are evaluating it to be. It is far more complex. First is, for Indian market, rupee is overvalued. If you overvalue the rupee, then the goods of the exports becomes costlier. That is, Indian goods are costlier because of the overvaluation. Okay, they will be costlier when compared to other currencies whose currencies are not overvalued or whose currencies are actually witnessing depreciation when in comparison to the dollar. But our currency is overvalued. If the currency is overvalued, the exports become costlier. What happens then? In the international scenario, you have to compete with the other countries as well. For example, Indian manufacturers have to compete with the Chinese manufacturers, have to compete with the Bangladeshi manufacturers. They have to see that the price of the goods is lower. But if you are overvaluing your currency, then obviously your competitive edge will be lost, right? And your exports are not valued when compared to the cheaper goods that we find from other countries that export the same kind of goods, similar goods. And the imports become cheaper if you overvalue the currency. If imports become cheaper, then the domestic manufacturers will feel the heat. They will not be able to sell the goods as freely as they could have been because of the cheaper imports. So that is why fixation of the price of the rupee in the international market is very important. Okay. So that is one of the reasons why presently our exports or imports are behaving in this manner. Next up is the projected global market slowdown, right? We are again and again seeing in the international scenario that economy at the global level is slowing down. There are multiple factors behind it. One of the important reasons is the inflation that we are witnessing in the United States and European market. You should be able to link all these topics, and then you could understand Indian economy well. And then you could also crack the preliminary questions as well. Okay? So there is global market slowdown at the international level. If there is global international slowdown, then the demand for Indian goods obviously will be impacted, right? If this demand will be impacted, then our ability to export is going to be impacted. Okay? It will be impacted. And if the global economy is slowing down, then the investments in India will be impacted, right? Because especially our IT companies are dependent upon how the global investments are made and how the global economy is trying to outsource certain works to Indian IT sector because it is diligent and it is cost effective in its approach and has expertise as well. So in this way, our economy is interlinked at the global level. Okay, so Indian IT company performance presently, which is witnessing a difficult in its phase, slowing down, or the employment issues. Okay, layoffs. These are the indication that presently we are suffering. Okay, this is one of the reason. Next is post-COVID recovery. Have we recovered entirely from the COVID? That is an issue. We are said to have witnessed the K-shaped recovery where certain sectors are witnessing growth, others are faltering. And the income levels of the Indian section could also be shown as a K-shaped recovery kind of thing. Why? Because the upper echelons of Indian society, that is the richer section, are witnessing their income levels rising, and the middle and lower sections are actually witnessing their incomes going down. Okay, incomes. Even in the incomes, we could refer the incomes, how they are rising, how they are coming down through this graph. That is K-shaped recovery is also used to explain this scenario as well. Okay, so the recovery is not certain. Recovery is not uniform. The richer sections are witnessing their incomes rising, whereas the middle and lower sections are witnessing their incomes to be decreasing. Next, the household savings are taking a hit. In comparison, or when we relate it to the GDP, the household savings are not increasing. They are actually reducing, declining. Household savings are important. Why? Because presently in our economy, we are dependent upon the deposits that are done in the banks for investment purposes. If the deposits in the bank comes down, because the household saving is lower, and this is on account of the economic scenario that presently we are witnessing, obviously it will impact the ability of the Indian economy to invest. So, hence the slowdown, hence the possibility of Indian economy getting a hit. And one of the important thing that influences Indian economy is the monsoon. There is inconsistency in Indian monsoon seasons. This is being witnessed year after year. If monsoon is behaving differently, the agricultural output is going to be impacted. 46% of population of India is still dependent upon agriculture for their livelihood. Then obviously it will impact their ability to consume, their ability to grow. Thus, also the food prices will be impacted. Food prices will actually go up. Why? Because the output will be lower due to the unavailability of proper irrigation facilities. Most of the agricultural land is still dependent upon rainfall for irrigation. It will be hit. And this actually reduces the rural consumption. Next is the looming job crisis that we all fear. The job crisis is still ever present. The IT companies' layoffs is especially the diagnosis of what is going on in the international scenario, especially how the Federal Bank of the United States is behaving. To control the inflation, they are raising the interest rates. Okay, this is one thing. To control inflation, we raise the interest rate. Right? If we raise the interest rates, obviously the credit becomes costlier. So the credit taken will be lower. We have also seen that increasing interest rates actually led to rise in bond yields. If this happens, then investment is mostly into the bond market rather than trying to invest in the companies. Next is the conflict in West Asia is another issue. Why? Because the present West Asia is strategically important as well as geopolitically too. The economic significance of West Asia is to be noticed. The fuel supply to the rest of the world is mostly from the West Asia. Of course, there are other regions which also export fuel, but these are one of the important dominant players. And if the scenario is spiraling out of control, then the fuel prices will rise. If the fuel prices rise, the inflation will be rising. Already the world is trying to recover from the inflation. This will add to that crisis. Okay, the price of the fuel could be impacted. And also the manufacturing of certain sectors whose manufacturing is actually linked to the fuel is used for manufacturing purposes, and thus these industries will be hit. For example, tire manufacturing is one such industry. Next is the rising inflation. We already talked about the inflation. Even in India, we are witnessing the inflation. We have seen the monsoonal impact. At the same time, the global economic scenario that is also leading to the rising inflation. Especially in the food and services, Indian markets are witnessing inflation. Though the central bank is trying to curb inflation rates, yet they are continuing. It requires multi-pronged strategies that you try to come up as you think along. Next is the investments. Okay, how the investments are behaving. What we witness now is foreign institutional investors are presently divesting. That is, they are taking away the money that they have invested in the country. Whereas Indian retail investors, they are investing their money in the market. That is, mutual funds, domestic institutional investors are investing. But what we have seen is that due to lack of growth in the Indian market, the companies in the Indian market, they are actually witnessing losses in the investments that they have made, especially the small and mid-cap sectors. Okay, so these losses are also an indication that Indian markets recovery is not uniform and not strong enough. This completes this article. Now let us move to the next one. Coming to the next article, it is an app on mother and child welfare. In this country, we as a welfare state are trying again and again to improve the nutritional levels of both the mother and children. Children especially, they are the future of the nation. Thus, their physical and mental health is of prior importance to us, utmost importance to us. So the title goes by App for Mother and Child Welfare. The relevance of the topic is the Poshan Tracker app and Poshan Abhiyan that you are going to learn in this session. Added to it, these are especially important to tackle prelims related questions. And if you look at the mains paper, GS paper 2, welfare schemes for vulnerable section. Okay. Now let us look into what this Poshan Tracker app is all about. The Poshan Tracker app, as the name itself suggests, it wants to track the Poshan levels, that is nutrition levels of the India. And particularly, here we are talking about the nutrition levels of children and mother. Okay, so it's a mobile phone based nutrition monitoring system of India. It gives us an opportunity to evaluate the nutritional levels as well as compare it with the past levels and try to see whether we are actually improving or not. There are various details within this tracker app that we need to take care of. Now let us look into the concept, that is about the app in detail. It is a centralized ICT platform and it is designed for evaluating the nutritional levels at the national, state and district level. Okay, not only at the national level but district as well as state levels. The Anganwadi infrastructure details, under which in Anganwadi facilities we are going to see whether there are toilets, whether there are drinking water, etc. Anganwadi centers, as you already know, we try to provide nutrition facilities to the children. Thus, having an infrastructure is also important. The infrastructure also provides us the ability to educate the children as well. That is preschool education. Then beneficiary count, we are trying to count the beneficiaries regarding the rations that they are going to take as well as the hot cooked food. This improves the nutrition. And finally, as we already seen, the nutritional outcomes, evaluation of the nutritional outcomes. So this is all the app is about. And the various modules available under the app are, we try to register the beneficiaries, that is, who are going to be the beneficiaries of the scheme to access the facilities under Poshan Abhiyan. And then daily job aid and visit scheduler for Anganwadi workers so that it is systematic. And we fix proper schedule for the Anganwadi workers to visit the centers, Anganwadi centers, at the same time, certain times homes as well. Next is we try to monitor the nutrition standards as per the standards set by the WHO. Next up is migration support to the migrants, and thus we want to also track the beneficiaries when they migrate, especially given the increasing migration that we are witnessing in the country from rural areas to urban areas. This is important. Next is dashboard to actually assess the nutrition levels. Now let us look into Poshan Abhiyan scheme. The scheme was actually launched in the year 2018. It wants to improve the nutritional levels, National Nutrition Mission targets. Okay, it has National Nutrition Mission targets, which try to improve the nutritional levels of adolescent girls, pregnant or lactating mother, and children from the years 0 to 6 years. So it is quite comprehensive. You have to know the targeted sections within a particular scheme to tackle the prelims related question. And it wants to use the convergence of tech, community engagement, and the targets that it has set is stunting, reducing the stunting levels, reducing the undernutrition levels, reducing the anemia levels, which especially the mothers are facing the problem. Close to 50% of the population is of the women are facing the problem of anemia and low birth weight. The stunting, the undernutrition, the low birth weight is still a prominent problem in India. We need to tackle it, especially regarding the taking care of the child's health, so that their mental capabilities are improved enough so that they could actually live in an environment to compete with the rest of the world. Okay, because especially these nutrition levels targeting and improving are important for improving the physical and cognitive capabilities. And that is why giving special attention to the children is important. Added to it, mother's health is important because lack of it could actually impact their child. Anemia levels of India are far higher than which could be acceptable levels, because certain times anemia levels of the women are far higher, greater than 50%, as we already talked about. So tackling it is important to safeguard the child of the health as well, to safeguard the health of the children as well. Now, from Poshan Abhiyan 1, we have entered into the next scheme, Poshan Abhiyan 2.0, which is far more comprehensive when compared to Poshan Abhiyan 1. Now let us see what are provided under Poshan Abhiyan 2 scheme. It is a more comprehensive program and it has various pillars within it. We have already seen Anganwadi services being within one of the important aspect, given they are the mediums through which we provide nutrition to the children. We have Anganwadi services. The Poshan Abhiyan is a continuation of the Poshan Abhiyan 2.0. We have scheme for adolescent girls, National Creche scheme that is added into it. Creche, as you know, it is an initiative to provide mother the ability to safeguard or take care of the child when she is doing the work as well. And it emphasizes maternal nutrition, infant and young child feeding norms, treatment protocol for malnutrition. So it is quite comprehensive. We have already seen about this. Now, it also introduced a new aspect, that is Poshan Vatika for homegrown nutrition, especially given the educational levels of the Indians are lacking to provide nutrition, which is far more comprehensive to tackle micronutritional deficiencies as well. The malnutrition is a problem. Added to it, we also have the micronutrient deficiencies. So giving proper directives to actually tackle these issues are important, and this provides a roadmap for it. And it also incorporates Poshan Tracker, as we already seen. It tracks or monitors the nutrition levels of the children and mother as well. The last article that we are going to deal is about the Wolbachia method. It is one of the important methods to control the spread of diseases on account of the bites of the mosquito, which releases the viruses and protozoa, etc., into the body of humans. Mosquito bite leading to diseases like malaria, dengue, etc. To curb these diseases, this is one of the important and possibly the best method. That is why it is regarded as an unlikely hero. It is a hero, but it is unlikely. Why it is unlikely and why it is a hero is what we are going to deal in this topic. The title is Wolbachia, an unlikely hero, and it is related to diseases and innovative measures to control the diseases. So you could expect the question, you could cite it as an example and also as topic from the prelims as well. UPSC syllabus, GS3, Science and Technology, Biotechnology, or technologies to actually make the life easier. You could relate this topic to that topic. We have a previous year question on Wolbachia method as well. The last year itself, 2023 question. It is with reference to the following, the Wolbachia method is related to. Okay. So as I have already introduced you, that Wolbachia method is trying to curb the diseases which are due to the infection caused by the mosquito bites that releases certain bacteria, protozoa, or viruses into the human body. So you could answer this question. The Wolbachia method is a biological strategy that we are trying to adopt to reduce the mosquito-borne diseases. Okay, mosquito-borne diseases like dengue, Zika, malaria, etc. As you know, the infection caused due to dengue, Zika, and malaria, etc., is leading to significant number of deaths, especially in the tropical country like India, and especially during the monsoon season, where the breeding grounds provided by the rains is higher. Okay, so for that purpose, this method is prominent. How the Wolbachia mechanism actually works? Vertical mechanism, as the name itself suggests, the Wolbachia method could be utilized to transmit the Wolbachia bacteria from one generation to the other generation. That is, the mosquitoes which lay eggs, which that ultimately hatch, and this Wolbachia method, which is infected to the first mosquito, is going to be transferred to its offspring. So in this way, we could see that over the course of time, we could transmit this bacteria to entire population of the mosquito. Next is how we are going to do it. We are going to do reproductive manipulations. That is, we are going to manipulate the reproduction that happens among the mosquitoes. There are two ways in which we manipulate the reproductive mechanisms that undertake. There are two ways in which we are going to see that the reproduction happens in mosquitoes that ultimately leads to transfer of Wolbachia bacteria into the entire population. These are cytoplasmic incompatibility and parthenogenesis. What is this cytoplasmic incompatibility? In this, there are two ways. One is the Wolbachia infected male mosquito is going to breed with uninfected female mosquito, and what happens is the laying of eggs by this female mosquito will hatch, but they contain the Wolbachia bacteria. So Wolbachia infection is transferred from the parents to the offspring in this way. Okay, and there is another way. A Wolbachia infected male will breed with Wolbachia infected female, that leads to production of eggs that will not hatch, that is unhatched. Next is parthenogenesis, where a female doesn't undergo sexual intercourse but yet produces eggs or yet produces offsprings. Okay, this is called as parthenogenesis, because generally reproduction involves sexual intercourse between male and female, but here, despite not undertaking sexual intercourse, despite not participating in sexual intercourse, they are able to produce the offspring. This is called parthenogenesis. So, Wolbachia infected female mosquito will lay the eggs despite not entering into sexual intercourse with the male, yet it lays eggs, and these eggs hatch, but even though they hatch, they are infected by Wolbachia bacteria. They are infected. So if you look at the entire cycle, we are witnessing the transmission of this Wolbachia bacteria from one mosquito to other mosquito in various forms. And why the Wolbachia infected mosquito has less ability to transmit diseases? This Wolbachia bacteria, which ultimately enters into the mosquito, competes with the other germs within the mosquito. That might be virus, that might be a bacteria, other bacteria, that might be the protozoa, etc., etc. And when it competes with them, it doesn't it reduces their capability to proliferate within the mosquito. If their strength in the mosquito reduces, even though the mosquito bites humans, its ability to transmit the diseases which are actually caused by the infection of these viruses or bacteria will go down. Okay, that is competition. Thus, infections will ultimately come down. Infections will come down. Thus, we have the ability now to use a biological strategy to control the diseases. Now, let us look into the benefits of the Wolbachia method. Next, why it is beneficial? Let us look at the benefits of the method. Firstly, it is safe. Why it is safe? It is naturally occurring. That is, we need not undertake any genetical biological modifications of the existing organism to produce Wolbachia bacteria, so as to fear of the later outcomes, of the future outcomes that might actually inconceivable. That is, we cannot conceive what happens in the future if we use a method like genetical modifications. Many worry about the genetical modifications. Those are not required for this method. It is safe, it is natural. And the other thing is, it is not harmful to both humans as well as animals. So, and the other advantage is, it is sustainable. That is, this process goes on its own. As we have already seen, how the Wolbachia bacteria enters from one generation to the other generation, ultimately leading to transmission without intervention of humans. On its own, it happens. So we need not again and again infect the bacteria into the mosquitoes. Next is, it is effective. That is, it has the ability to control the spread of the diseases. One case is, it has reduced the dengue by up to 77%, where the bacteria is injected into the mosquito. Other thing is that it is environmentally friendly because it does not require the use of pesticides or other chemicals. So all this method makes this mosquito a hero. But there are certain problems. What are the problems? It takes several years to actually infect the population of mosquitoes with this bacteria. That is one of the major issue. And the other issue is, where the density of the mosquito is higher, its effectiveness is lower. Mosquito density is also one of the factors that we have to look into capabilities of this method. So this completes the class. Now let us look into certain practice questions. The first question is with reference to Commission for Air Quality Management. Consider the following statements. There is statements with respect to the Commission for Air Quality Management. It is an autonomous body tasked with improving the air quality in Delhi. So this is a true statement that we have already seen in the article. Next is, the orders of the Commission will prevail over the Central Pollution Control Board and other state pollution control boards. So we already seen the extraordinary powers vested in this body to control the pollution in Delhi, right? So it is superseding body, and we have already seen it is a statutory body created on account of the law passed by the Delhi Legislative Assembly. So how many of the statements given above are correct? As both are true, the answer is C, both 1 and 2. Next question. The next question is on government bond yields. So we have already seen an article which have dealt in detail about various concepts like inflation, government bond yields, depreciation, devaluation, etc. That knowledge will help you to solve this problem. Indian government bond yields are influenced by which one of the following? The action of United States Federal Reserve. Let us examine it. How the action taken by the United States Federal Reserve, that is the central bank of United States, influences Indian government bond yields. As we are living in a globalized world, economies are interrelated and interlinked. Given the size of United States economy, it obviously has a wider impact. Now let us examine whether it influences Indian government bond yields or not. If United States Federal Reserve increases its interest rates, what generally happens is, it is safer for the investors of the United States to invest in their government bonds. So what they will do is, they will invest more in the government bonds of the United States. The investment in the government bonds is less riskier. Because it is less riskier, everyone or most of them tries to minimize their risks. That is what the investors do. And thus, the flight of the capital from India increases. Flight of the capital. The flight of the capital here that I am referring to is the investors of the United States who have invested in India will try to take back their investments from India and invest in their United States government bonds, which are less riskier, and there is certainty of returns. So if the flight of the capital in India is on account of United States Federal Reserves, this ultimately impacts the government bond yields. Why? Because the money flow in the market in India reduces, right? Why? Because capital of the United States have went away from India into United States. So this impacts the money flow. If the money flow is impacted, there is a possibility of it impacting the interest rates of India. Because interest rates of India are impacted on account of the United States Central Bank, this will have the ultimate impact upon the government bond yield. We already know that the government bond yields and the interest rates share an inverse relationship. Now, we need not go into the details of how they are related to each other in an inverse fashion because it takes a lot of time, but they are related in an inverse relationship manner. So that is why United States Federal Bank impact is on Indian government bond yields. Next is the actions of Reserve Bank of India. Obviously, the Reserve Bank of India has the power to either increase the interest rates or decrease the interest rates So it has the ability to influence the government bond yields. What is meant by inverse relationship? Inverse relationship means if the interest rates of the economy are influenced, if they increase, then the government bond yield reduces. That is the inverse relationship between the government bond yield and interest rates. Next, inflation and short-term interest rates. Obviously, these two influences the government bond yield, as I already explained you, the inverse relationship between both of them. Now, the relationship between government bond yields and interest rates of an economy. Now, the relationship between government bond yields and interest rates is quite complicated. You have to deal it by understanding its impact on short-term and long-term maturity levels of bonds. So do not get confused about how they are relating to each other, because in the article we have seen that the increased interest rates of the United States has actually led to increased bond yields. Now that relationship is quite complicated and it takes time to elaborate. But we have already seen how both are related to each other. Select the correct answer using the code given below. As both 1, 2 and 3 are true, the answer is D. Next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Wolbachia method. Wolbachia is a genetically engineered bacteria. We have already seen that the Wolbachia bacteria is not genetically engineered bacteria. It is a natural bacteria. That is, it is naturally available in the environment. There is no need for genetical modification to create Wolbachia bacteria. Next is Wolbachia method is based on principle of competitive inhibition. We already seen that the Wolbachia bacteria which enters into the mosquito competes with other germs. The other germs might be virus, bacteria, that is other bacteria, or protozoa, etc. And thus this competition ultimately reduces the population density or the population of these germs, thus inhibiting the ability of malaria to cause infection in human beings by injecting these germs into our body. Next is this method, so the second statement is correct. Next is this method is highly effective in areas with high mosquito density. We have seen that where the mosquito density is higher, their ability to spread into the mosquito population is lower. This is one of the issues with regards to the Wolbachia method. So third statement is false. Both 1 and 3 are false. How many of the above statements are correct? Only 1. So answer is A. Now let us look into one practice mains question. Given the deteriorating air conditions of the major cities in India, especially we have seen this article by relating it to Delhi, elaborate on the reason for rise in pollution. Mention the innovative measures to mitigate pollution. Okay, so all these are already dealt with in detail in the article. You could use the points and write the answer comprehensively. So this completes the article analysis as well as question discussion. Please do like, share and subscribe this channel. Thank you.